At this point, I would say the Clippers need to play with more desperation, more urgency. You're only a couple of games away from the 8th seed trying to hold down the fort just so you can be a playoff team. But now's the time for them to get out their slump and play with their backs against the wall. But let's talk about it. Now, the Clippers have lost 3 straight games against the Jazz, the Thunder, and the Spurs. Now, the Jazz, we can exclude them because they have been an ascending team the last couple years. Donovan Mitchell's getting better. As a cohesive unit, they're getting better. So you have to let that loss go. And before that, they did win a game against the Suns, who were shorthanded, but still a win is a win. So that definitely, can build up some pride there and build up some chemistry along with confidence. But when you look at losses like the Thunder and the Spurs, and I don't want to make too much out of it because, as I said before, it's a long season to go and a lot of things are going to happen. You're going to have dips in the road and, you're going to have highs and lows. But when you look at losses like that, those two, you shake your head once again. Because, to see a team like the Clippers go on a 2 or 3 game winning streak without Paul George, then he comes back against a team like the Spurs and you lay an egg at home, losing by 24 points to a team like the Spurs who don't even have a superstar. But that night, it looked like they had Kawhi Leonard playing for them. That's utterly embarrassing. That's definitely not good basketball. That's not playing smart basketball. That's not high IQ basketball. And right now, they're in a 3-game losing streak, and now the Kings are coming up tonight for them. And when you think about that in its entirety, that's a team who's playing hard every night. And that's a team who can definitely beat them. They have some shooters on there, and Buddy Hield is only getting better. So is De'Aaron Fox. And those 2 players right there can factor out what Paul George can do in regards to scoring. And then what about the rest of the guys? And this is the problem with the Clippers. The other guys sometimes don't tend to show up. And they're getting paid good enough money to go out there and show up and produce. And that's just not good enough for the Clippers to win, because you can't blame it all on the other guys. You have to blame the whole roster, because there's times where even Paul George comes out there. He may have 30 points, but he may have took 30 shots to get it. And this is what I'm talking about. In order for the Clippers to be a better team, efficiency is going to have to be a part of their diet. They're going to have to take more high-quality shots, and they're going to have to rotate the ball more between other players and amongst each other. That's the only way they're going to do it. And I've said before, this team right here is not only confusing, but this team right here makes you want to pull your hair out at times, because if for some reason they just don't understand what it means to play with the mentality of our backs against the wall every game. They play with it when, if the Clippers lose 5 or 6 in a row and they're the 9th seed or the 8th seed, then they'll start playing like, they're supposed to. But this is what I'm saying. Sometimes you can't turn that switch on and off. Sometimes you have to have the switch on the whole time. And sometimes you have to just be consistent all the way through. And that's just the way it is, And honestly, you have to be that way all the time, honestly. But my point is this. The Clippers can't flip a switch. And because they know they can't do that, they can't allow themselves to lose the teams that they should beat. They can't allow themselves to lose games that can hinder their chances of making the playoffs. Because right now, honestly, that's the Clippers' goal. They really can't even really focus on a championship because they're not good enough to win a championship right now. They don't have Kawhi Leonard. And they haven't even really got the best of Serge Ibaka yet, in which they definitely had high hopes for him, entering this team to give them that type of gameplay. And he hasn't done it. And, he's been injured, of course, so you got to give him some, some credit there. You got to, be easy on him when it comes to that. But at the same time, Serge Ibaka really doesn't look like he's going to be the player he was, or the player that they envisioned him to be, or the player that he was on the Toronto Raptors. And that's what they were expecting to have. And I don't know if it's because of rotation purposes or Serge is not happy because of the tweets and all this other stuff coming out. Who knows what it is, but they're not getting that type of production out of Serge Ibaka. And he hasn't been back that long, but I mean, just looking at his movements and the way he's moving and how he's playing, he's not even playing like the Serge Ibaka of a few years ago. But back injuries will do that to you. But that's another story. When you look at this team overall, they got the team to do a lot of good things, but the talent to do a lot of good things and going out there putting on display is two different things. And going against a team like the Kings tonight is definitely another competition, is definitely another part of the competition that the Clippers have to face and be ready for, because this team is ready to go out there and get another W, and this team is ready to go out there and make a name for themselves. That's really all the Kings are trying to do. When you play teams like this, they're trying to make name for themselves. They're not on TV as much. They don't have much airtime. They don't get as much notoriety as a team like the Clippers or the Lakers or teams like that. And out here in California, they don't get that. They don't get that type of notoriety and publicity and things like that. So anytime they get a chance to knock off a LA team like the Lakers or Clippers or even the Warriors, any California team, they oblige that. And this is what I'm saying. That is going to be that could be the detriment to the Clippers if they don't come out there with the same mentality. You have to come out there and put your foot down and just knock these teams off. That's the only way you're going to get respect as a team, the way you are. And that's the only way you're going to build. Because right now you're not building, you're building backwards. And like I said, what I'm seeing from this team, I don't see championship written on this team. To me, I said before, and you may not agree, but this team right here should have a better record than what they have. Even though they had some injuries and things like that. I mean, honestly, for the most part, they've been the same team they've been the last 2 years. They can't blame it on Serge Ibaka. He really hasn't been there in the last couple of years. You played well without Serge Ibaka. I mean, look what you did in the playoffs. You see what I'm saying? So you can't say too much about Serge, him not playing the way he's supposed to. Well, he really hasn't even been a part of the roster or the rotation, to really even help them to be more of a formidable team. But they still found ways to be good when they needed to. But like I said, you can't turn that switch on and off. You have to be more consistent. And you look at if you look at their schedule, I mean, if you look at their schedule, I'd say, let's see, I'm thinking the next 4 or 5 games, I think they play, the Kings tonight, then you got the Nuggets, the Nets, the Celtics, and, I think they play the Nets again, and the Raptors, I believe, or something like that. But those can be, they could lose every one of those games. I mean, they really can. They could lose every one of those games because looking at how they played against a team like the Spurs, looking how they played against a team like the Thunder, a team they should beat with the Thunder. They should beat him. They should beat them without Paul George easily. They don't even need Paul George to beat the Thunder. I mean, this team did lose by 73 points. The Clippers should be able to beat them without Paul George and definitely without Kawhi, but losing to a team like the Spurs by 24 points at home when they don't even have a superstar, nowhere remotely close to having one, they could lose every one of those games I just told you going forward. Because every one of them games going forward, they have at least one person they rely on that can get them, to the finish line. And maybe besides the Raptors, that might be one team that they might play that can, but I would say Pascal Siakam can have a breakout game. He really can. But I'm just saying every other team I named that they're playing going forward has a superstar or a star player that can get them to the finish line. I mean, the Kings, like I said, Buddy Hield and De'Aaron Fox can make up scoring-wise. They can make up for what Paul George gives. Then, the Nuggets, Jokic, of course. Then the Nets, nothing to be said, KD. This is what I'm talking about. Like, you're gonna start playing better competition. The schedule is gonna get tougher, and you need all the wins you can get against the lower seeded teams or the teams you should beat, so you can build confidence enough to play the better teams and have more of a game plan going into them games. These games that's coming up, it seems like from what I've seen from the Clippers so far, the game plan really isn't going to be much different. It's just going to be isolation basketball at times. It's going to be some ball movement. And like I said, you can't mix the two. You got to be one or the other. And if you're trying to mix the two in your gameplay, you're going to find a lot of inconsistency, and you're going to find a lot of inconsistency in your overall record, which is the reason why I think they're one game above 500 and they're only like 1.5 or 2 games out of the A spot. And this is what I'm saying. Like, it's going to get tight in the West. The West it's going to get tougher, and the schedule gets tougher as it goes. And like I said, if the Clippers don't find a way to play with that sense of urgency, if they don't find a way to play with more cohesiveness, they're going to find themselves not even in the playoffs. I mean, and it's true. And unless they find a way to, play the way they're supposed to and understand every game counts. Every game is their last game. Every game is their last. Like when people say your first impression is your last, well, every game is their first impression and every game is their last, because that's how they have to play and that's how they have to look at it, because they can't afford to leave any losses or any wins on the table. And they can't afford to leave, games knowing that they could have played better and they got beat by a team that really just shouldn't even be on the same stratosphere as them. It's just utterly embarrassing for them. And like I said, this is a tough stretch for them coming up. They got some tough teams coming in. They do got the home game against the Nets. So then they got the home game against the Nuggets. That'll help. But like that, the road game they have being at Boston, and tonight I believe they're the road team at the Kings place tonight. And, they're also they're a road team when they play the Raptors. So, I mean, there again, that's all in Canada. So, I mean, like I said, games are tougher when you're playing away. And you just lost a game last night at home or the other night against the Spurs. By 24 points at home against the Spurs. That's just embarrassing basketball. Because if you can't at least beat a team like that at home, or at least make the score respectable. Now, the Clippers would have lost against the Spurs maybe 116 to 114. We wouldn't, maybe the conversation would be a whole lot different, or we wouldn't be having one. But when you lose like that to a team like that who has no business being on the same floor as you, and that was at home, well, it should scare Clippers fans if you have to go on the road to Canada, to Toronto, which you have to play them in a few days. It scares teams when you have to go even on the road tonight to the Sacramento Kings. It should scare you. It should scare, Clipper Nation if you got to go on the road to the Nets. Now, they do have a home game against the Nets, I think the day after Christmas, but I think it's like a week later from that, they actually play the Nets on the road. So it's like, hey, looking at that loss against the Spurs at home makes you worry about this team when they go on the road. They might play even worse. And this is what I'm saying. Paul George can't save the day all the time. Kawhi Leonard can't save the day all the time. Those other guys on the team has got to step up. Those other guys on the team got to realize you're getting a paycheck just like Kawhi and PG is. You may not be getting as big of a paycheck as they are because you're not as good as a player as they are. But at the same time, you're good enough to be on the NBA roster and put the jersey on and represent the team and represent Clipper Nation. But you're not playing like it. And like I said, the Clippers need more out of everybody. And this is the reason why I said Ty Lue got upset at the team and just looked at it as an embarrassing loss. And he had every right to. It's almost like he was pointing fingers, saying how embarrassing the loss was against the Spurs, because, I mean, he's seen it several times over and over this year. They've even had some games where they won this year where it's like, man, they could have played a lot better. They just found a way to eke that game out or something like that and pull through with a lucky victory, because they've won games this year also where everybody on the floor in the starting lineup shot piss poor. Paul George, I've seen plenty of games where Paul George would have 33 points or 31 points and took 29 shots. Reggie Jackson would have 21 points but took 23 shots. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's plenty of games where they have won some games, luckily, but when you look at the overall stat sheet and overall how they play like trash. And that's the reason why you see them have lapses against teams like the Spurs, against a team like Cleveland, who held them to like 80 points at home, and losing to a team like the Pelicans twice in 1 week. This is the reason why they have losses like that, because they're just not really overall consistent, and they're just really one of those teams right now that's kind of just staying afloat, middle of the pack. And that's not where the Clippers should be. They should be higher than that. They should be looked at better than that. They definitely have a better roster than a lot of teams assembled in the NBA. They're definitely one of the deepest teams in the NBA. And I've said that before about this team. But just because you're one of the deepest, it doesn't mean you're one of the best. And it doesn't mean you play that way every night. And the Clippers clearly don't. So it's like, right now, the only way they're going to get off their three-game skid and, out this slump that they're in is, to play with their backs against the wall, because honestly, that's when they play at their best. And it's really bad and it's really sad to see that they play that way, but you can't always win that way. And most of the time you don't win that way. You don't win when you feel like you could turn a switch on and off. That switch has to be on 24/7, all times, play the same way, be consistent, win or lose, play the same way every time. And honestly, I will give them this. They are playing the same way every time, which is inconsistent and a lot of isolation basketball. But that's the reason why they're having embarrassing losses like this. And this is the reason why I said before, they don't want to keep going through these type of losses, because now what is the organization thinking? Do they need to make another trade? Do they need to switch some things up? And like I said, when you make trades, a lot of times you break up the chemistry of a locker room, and the whole chemistry is different. Because honestly, I personally think, if you ask me, if they had Patrick Beverley still along with Rondo, I don't think they would be losing games like against the Spurs by 20 something points. I just don't believe it, because putting somebody like him in there, he would have guarded DeJounte Murray a whole lot better, and DeJounte Murray would have been a whole lot less effective. You see what I'm saying? Or whoever else was on the team that might have been doing the boatload of the scoring, Patrick Beverley could have guarded him. Rajon Rondo, even though he wasn't a good locker room guy, and I'm actually kind of glad they did get rid of him specifically, but even still, his basketball IQ, he would have been perfect for games like that, where he can go in there and impose his will on the opposing defense and get to the paint, make some good passes, and make the Spurs think a little bit more. The Spurs really didn't even have to strategize none about the Clippers. Everything the Clippers were doing was predictable. Everything the Spurs were doing was unpredictable to the Clippers. And that's the way it's been in a lot of games the Clippers played this year. They look more like the dazed and confused team, and the team on the opposing end looked like the team that had the better game plan coming into the game. And that's really, really hard to say and think about and fathom, because the Clippers have a better coach. I think the Clippers have one of the best, if not the best coach in the league, maybe besides Eric Spoelstra, and a couple of others. You have a better coach, and you have better players, you got better talent, and you're losing the teams that has talent on there that's not even remotely close to yours. And it's just no excuse for it. And like I said, if the Clippers want to be a championship team, they're going to have to find a way to change their ways, and that's just the way it is. If they don't change their ways no time soon, or maybe change somebody on the roster or something like that, I'm telling you, it's not going to bode well for them. It's not going to bode well for them at all. And like I said, the more they lose, the longer Kawhi Leonard's probably going to take to come back, because there's no need for him to rush back if this team can't even stay afloat to keep themselves as a playoff team. If you prove that you could win a series last year against a team like Utah, the number one seed, without Kawhi Leonard, if you prove that you could win that series without his expertise, even though he did play the first two games of that series, if you prove you could win without his expertise, then you have to come out this year and play a lot better. And I'm pretty sure everybody thought they would play a lot better. But like I said, it might be an up and down season for the Clippers. An up and down season is not good enough. And that's not going to make Kawhi want to come back any sooner. And that's not going to make the owner, Steve Ballmer, happy with what he's seeing. It's not going to make Ty Lue happy with the talent that he has. And like I said, if they do shake up the locker room and make some trades, well, that can throw the chemistry off even more of the team, because now they got new pieces and they're trying to implement and get them on the same page before the playoffs start, which comes right around the corner quicker than what you know it. And that's just not a recipe for success, at times. And not unless you're trading for really big name players who can come in there and understand basketball at a level that most players don't, because they're a superstar. Now, they're trading for somebody like that, then okay, maybe so. But what superstar is out there they can trade for? It really isn't any. There isn't none at all that I can see. So my point is this: the Clippers better find a way to get it together, and they better find a way to get it together soon, because the way they look right now, they look a mess, and they look like the type of team that would be in a playing tournament at best, and roll the dice on however their season ends. That's what type of team they look like right now. And actually, they've been looking like that over the last several games. They had the 2 big wins, against the Spurs and Orlando, without Paul George. But you look at a few games before that. They played pretty decent, but you can look at the shooting and the efficiency and some of the questionable turnovers, and just like I said, there's times in games, like from quarter to quarter, if you really break down the Clippers, if you look at quarter to quarter from the first to the fourth, there's some time in games where they just play lackadaisical. And like I said, when you play lackadaisical and allow teams to hang around, you can get beat. You can easily get beat by anybody. And it's bad when you see a team like them beat a team like the Suns, even though they were shorthanded, but come back and lose to a team like the Spurs by 24 points. It's bad to see them beat a team like the Suns, and then come back and lose to a team like the Thunder, when I can't even name one player on the Thunder. And the couple guys I can name, Gillis Alexander, he's pretty good, but he's not like really a star player in the NBA. And the other guy, I think his name is Dort. I don't even know who the hell he is or where the hell he came from, but he made the NBA roster and he got a jersey on, so I got to respect him. But this is my point. You can't lose to guys like that. You definitely have way more talent than that. And it shouldn't even came down to the last shot for anybody to hit that, because this team lost by 73 points. So to me, everybody should beat the Thunder. Anytime you see the Thunder on your roster, that should be a W penciled in. That's just my opinion. But like I said, the Clippers are finding themselves in situations they don't need to be in. And the way they're looking right now, if they don't pick it up and if they don't find a way to get some consistency, they might be a play-in tournament team at best, and they might not even make the playoffs. And like I said, then what is Kawhi Leonard going to think? Then what is the organization going to think? Then, where do you go from there? And I'm not saying the Clippers are going to fall to that realm or fall in that space, but they definitely can, because like I said, it's just too much inconsistent basketball. And what I mean by that is they don't come to the arena every night with the same game plan. It's like every other team you look at, they come in with the same game plan. Even the bad teams in the NBA that I look at, like I said, the Spurs or maybe even the Thunder. Look at those teams. They come in with the same game plan every night. We're going to play as hard as we can. We're going to play as hard as we can on both ends of the floor, and we're not going to leave any excuses out there on the floor. We're going to play, our best basketball, and we're going to put our best foot forward, and however the dice fall, that's how it falls. Even the bad teams it looks like they have a game plan coming into games. It looks like the Clippers play different every time you watch them. Sometime Paul George will be on fire, him and Reggie. And then, you have inconsistency out of Marcus Morris at times. And then Paul George goes in his, 3, 4, 5 games in a row where he's shooting under 30% in the game, taking 30 shots, scoring 30 points. And then there's times where they just go to this isolation basketball because they feel like they can just beat everybody one-on-one. And then at the end of the game, they're looking up at the score and they lost. You see what I'm saying? It's like it's like they don't have the same mindset every game, and this is what gets you beat in the NBA. You got to have the same mindset and you got to have the same game plan, but you got to make adjustments while you're doing it. So if you do have success, 6-7 game winning streak like the Clippers had, you have to build on that. You can't regress. And it looks like it's been a roller coaster ever since that 7-game win streak. That's what it looks like to me. And I think that's what it's going to look like the rest of the season, unless they make some changes, whether on the roster or whether mindset, or I don't know. It's just going to have to be something different. Something different going to have to transpire for this team for them to be a lot better than what they are. Because honestly, if they stay this way, you'll see them go on 3-4 game winning streaks, but you'll also see them go on 4 or 5 game losing streaks. And like I said, they don't have no room for error. They're in the 6th seed right now. They're 1 or 2 games out of the 8th spot. So by next week, honestly, they could be a 9th seed. That's just very possible. Not saying it's going to happen, but it's very possible. And like I said, I don't know what it's going to take for this team to wake up, but they definitely need to do it sometime soon, because if they don't, the season's going by. We're not too far, not too awfully far from the All-Star break. We're already near Christmas now, so you can basically say we're right at January. So, the All-Star break is like a month after that. So, you gotta, this is when you really really need to start picking it up and understanding who your team is and everybody understanding their role. And this is when teams need to start to really need to start to gel, because going into next year, which is the same season, but actually the next year, that's when teams really want to give themselves the New Year's resolution of, we're going to be a better team. We saw what we did this year. We're starting the new year with this, and this is how we're going to play, and this is what's going to help us get to the ultimate destination. But it's like the Clippers don't even have that in place. It's like they don't even have that thought process the way they play on the floor, and it's just utterly embarrassing to me. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully they put 2 and 2 together and come up with a formidable plan. You see what I'm saying? So we'll see how it pans out for them, and hopefully more better days or more bright days than dim days. That's the only thing I can say. I mean, hopefully the Clippers find a way to put it together. I believe that they can, because they have the talent, but like I said, you can only defend the team but so much. At some point you got to go out there and put the product on the field and on the floor, and that's what it comes down to. But hey, that's my take on the situation. You leave any comments in the comment section. You let me know what you think, like always. And hey, Khaliis out.